Alright folks, and welcome back. This week I'll be following on from the photogrammetry lecture talking about Agisoft Photoscan and some of the processes and workflows required for turning your photographs into a 3D model and some workflows in external packages that are also required. So to start with, let's just look at some images I've taken already. So we discussed in the lecture the principle of photogrammetry is taking two or more photographs from a different position so relevant points can be calculated and depth maps can be created. So in this instance of a tree, I photographed in Markeaton Park. You can see I've basically just gone around the tree from a variety of positions, making sure there's an overlap between viewpoints. Then I've also kind of zoomed in on the bottom of the tree, because this, if it was in game, would be the area that was most visible by the player. So if I wanted more detail, I'm just going to take more photographs of the relevant areas. So that's that. Now there's a kind of way of preparing images to get better results in Photoscan. And this is by basically creating more contrast within the photograph. It can be done in Lightroom, it can be done in Photoshop. But if you're doing it in Photoshop, you've obviously got to set up an action so it kind of applies it to all the same photographs, etc. for the changes you make to one. So a quicker way and more efficient way really is in Lightroom. Now this software is installed on the machines in the labs. So if you don't have access to it at home anywhere else, you can do it in the labs. So to start with, we just need to import the images by going to File, Import Photos, and navigate to where they are. The file type I'm using is the raw footage from the camera, and the format created by a Nikon camera is .nef files, so that's why you might not be familiar with this format. So once the folder's been navigated to, everything's highlighted, all we have to do is import. So import those images and it'll bring everything in. So that's our library. Next we want to go to develop. Just zoom in on the photograph and we can kind of see it's quite noisy really. So what we want to do anyway is make it more improve the contrast. So Agisoft can detect points easier and usually results in a better quality model being generated. So firstly, we just want to drop the exposure a little bit, pull up the contrast. Well, leave that there for the time being. Reduce the highlights, increase shadows, reduce whites, raise up the black, and then improve the contrast or boost the contrast. And you can see how all of a sudden it becomes more contrasty. Next, under the sharpening tab, we actually want to reduce the sharpening to try and, because it's just going to exaggerate some of the noise that was already in the image. Secondly, increase the luminance, which is going to reduce some of the noise. It's going to reduce the noise as well. So as you can see, we start to get less artifacts and less noise, such as that. And finally, under the lens corrections, we don't actually want to do enable profile corrections based on the camera type. We just want to do color, remove chromatic aberration. Go back to the top, just boost the contrast up to the top. Take the highlights down. So that's now going to provide a better result in Agisoft for generating the model. Now once one image has been modified, just select the first image at the bottom of the window pane at the bottom, select to the end so they're all selected, and just press sync. And then I will synchronize all the images for the same settings we've just changed. So I'll just synchronize this and pause it while it does a process. Right, so the filter's been applied to all the images. Now all we need to do is export them. So with everything selected, just go to export and choose a specific folder. In this instance, I've just created a new folder in the same areas where the trees was, called high contrast. So high contrast folder is where they'll be saved to. and we don't want to rename the files. We want to keep them exactly the same because they're not going to be overwritten anyway because they're in a different file, different folder. We have different formats. Sometimes it's better to actually use the TIFF for the actual the point referencing aspect of Agisoft because there'll be less compression. But sometimes for this asset, because it's quite big and it's not something we're going to spend too much time focusing on, I'm just going to use a JPEG, and that's it. So we just export those images out, and you can kind of see in the top corner it'll say it's exported the images out. Right, so now that process is finished, you can now see that all the images have been exported to the high contrast folder we stated, and this principle would then be applied to the ones that would to the textures that would want to be used as the actual texture map we would reference. So instead of having such high contrast, let's move back to the first photograph. Rather than having such high contrast, we would reduce that, even out the tones, bring back some of the highlights, just make it a little bit more even. We start to see the actual image starts to become a little flatter. Bring the contrast down again. And the same process would be involved now by creating a different folder. For instance, new export all the images. Make sure everything's selected from the first photo, like that. Export. Make a new folder. More contrast, select the folder, ensure the JPEGs, and export, and it'll go through the same process again. So I'll just pause this while it processes them. Now that process is completed, we can just compare the two sets of photographs between the high contrast, which will be used for the point referencing and generating a model, and then the more normalized textures which will be used for texture creation. And that is the preparation stage complete now for beginning work in Photoscan.